G'day guys, Jeff from Beer Cartel here. I'm broadcasting live a little bit later than normal, and this was not really a planned video, but I thought I'd do one because it is a National Day for Belgium today, so July 21. I hinted at that last week when I did a video and I was talking about the Ypres beer from Struis, and I thought I'd do a video today. I'm actually broadcasting from home, not from Beer Cartel HQ and not from a pub or a venue or a brewery, but just at home. So this is a bit of a nightcap beer that I'm going to have tonight, and I thought I'd have it given that it's Belgium's National Day, which I did mention that is half of my heritage. So that's the half that I'll be celebrating today. To all my family that is still in Belgium, dad, cousins, aunties, uncles, I hope that when the 21st does come around, it's actually just come around, so it must be about midday there. I hope that you're celebrating well and that you guys are fait la bonne fête. So I hope you guys are having a good day. But for everyone here at home in Australia or anywhere else that you may be viewing, I thought I would do a little bit of a taster and a bit of history about one very special beer, which is the Westvleteren 12. But before I go into that, you may see a bit of difference. I got a haircut this morning. One thing that I did not cut is my beard. Now, it's probably looking quite shabby, and it will continue to look shabby because I've put myself a bit of a challenge. I'm going to try and continue to grow it until the 1st of November. So every year, if you guys have followed us for the last few years, we always have a Movember raffle, and all the guys at work basically shave down their beards or start growing a moustache. And I thought, well, what better way to do it than actually grow a really large beard, which goes well with the craft beer industry. And then on the 1st of November, I'll look to shave that off and go clean cut and then start growing a mow. I will warn you that my mow does turn out a bit like Chuck Norris's. It's quite fat and thick. So expect to see that come November. Last year we raised over $2,500 for men's health with regards to Beyond Blue, which is our charity of choice. So every year over the last few years we've always raised some money for that. There's a raffle that we do, and through that raffle you can buy tickets, and there's a few $100s worth of beer that you can win. So keep an eye out for that. Watch my beard grow over the next few videos, and then we'll see how we go on the 1st of November. But today, so I've got two beers here. I think they're just out of shot. One is the Westvleteren 12 and the other one's the Westvleteren 8. Now I'm only going to go through the Westvleteren 12 today and a bit of history about the Westvleteren brewery, but the Westvleteren 8 is actually probably the favourite beer of my wife. So Claire, it's a shout out for you. Once I'm finished this video, I will crack this open for you and we will share that as well as the Westvleteren 12. The last time I had a Westie 12 was when Dad was over here at Christmas time. We had one that was almost just on date, on the recommended dates on the bottle caps. They have their recommended dates, and we thought that it probably wasn't the best one we've had. I mean, I haven't had hundreds of the Westvleteren 12 and Westvleteren 8s, but I've had a few, and we did feel that it probably wasn't at its optimal drinking. They do say that you can actually keep them beyond the dates that are marked on it. Talking about these bottles, they're quite interesting. So the blue cap is the Westvleteren 8. They're best known for three beers: the blonde, the 8, and the 12. So the blue cap's that one. That's the gold cap, which is the Westvleteren 12. And you may notice there's no labelling on these beers. So it's quite a distinctive characteristic of the Westvleteren beers. They use the traditional bottles that a lot of the Trappist breweries use. I think it's Westmalle use a very similar one where they've got the collar across there with some embossing that says Trappistine beer, because it is a Trappist beer, one of the 11 Trappist breweries around the world. Most are in continental Europe. There is one in the US called Spencer, which probably started a few years back. I don't know the exact date. And this is quite distinctive in terms of the bottles that some of them do use. Westvleteren is known for not having any labels. That will soon change though. So the EU labelling law is actually stating that they're going to have to start putting a label on it. The reason for that, right, the bottle cap, I'll try and give you a bit of a close-up with that. You can see it's got the brewery, it says 12, it's got the percentage. I think it might even have the brewery address. So the brewery is Saint Sixtus, or Saint Sixtus is the brewery. based in Westvleteren, which is in the sort of northeastern part of Belgium, probably a couple of hours away from Brussels. If you've ever been in that part of the world, it's very close to where my grandfather's family comes from, in Popperinge, and not too far from Ypres, which is the town that I spoke about last week in last Thursday's video. So what they're going to have to do to meet EU regulation and new legislation, they're going to put a label on there that has the origins of the ingredients they use in the beer. Now, the reason they're going to have to go with the label is because obviously you can see that the space on that bottle cap is pretty much maxed out. So they cannot fit any more on there. So they're going to have to go for a label. There was a production run of some of these that you may see images of. I think maybe the image on our website for this beer might actually have it, and it's got the Roman numerals, the X, and then two singles, two ones effectively, and that was a commercial production run that was made for the US when they were looking to upgrade the brewery a few years back. So if you ever do have one of those, that's my understanding of why those do have X11 or a 12. Interesting thing about this beer. So it's called the Westvleteren 12. Originally it was 12%. Part of the problem was, I think it was about the 1930s thereabouts, they kind of struggled to actually create this beer consistently at 12%, mainly because they didn't have the modern technology that we have today. So they've actually dialed back the percentages, and it's 10.2%. Today is what you'll get on the Westvleteren 12. So originally named after the percentage, but it is 10.2%. And even though they do have modern equipment now that they could dial it back up to the 12%, they've historically always kept it at 10.2%. Couple other things. So Westvleteren, you can go near the brewery, and just outside across the road from the brewery there is a little cafe where you can get tasters of the beers. I have seen the Westvleteren Blonde on at the Belgium Beer Festival, which is held in September. And if you do go, make sure that you check out the website, the St. Sixtus website, because they do have some date ranges where they close down the brewery. I think it was towards the end of September or August. Last time I was there, it was either a 2 or a 4 week closure, but it's well worth checking it out before making the trip out there and then being disappointed by not being able to taste some of the beers at the little cafe there. So it's all run by monks, and that's what a Trappist brewery is. They're run by a monk order, and they create their beers to sustain themselves and the local community and so forth. Other famous Trappist breweries, I think the guys like Westmalle and Chimay and the like, and Rochefort, they're Trappistine beers, and you can get those more easily than these. So the Westvleteren, it's not a cheap beer. We retail them at $65 a bottle. If you are in Europe, you can often pick them up for probably about 15 euros, something along those lines, depending on where you are getting them from. With the actual beer, it's a quadruple style. As I mentioned, it is gone from 12% to 10.2%, and it stays at 10.2%. It's rated one of the best beers in the world, and you'll often see it as the #1 beer in the world. And that is probably a combination that it is an excellent beer, but it's also a combination about how hard it is to get. So there's probably an element of trying to catch it and get it. And then once you've gotten it, I think there's probably a heightened experience. And to talk about that in terms of how hard it is to get, they do 60,000 cases. So cases comes in a wooden crate. That wooden crate has 24 of these bottles, and they only do a production run of 60,000 cases per annum. I think it's about 63,000 to be a bit more exact, and that's the lowest production that any of the Trappistine breweries does. So I don't know the exact numbers on the other ones, but I do know that it is the lowest production for a Trappist brewery. Established in 1838 is the Westvleteren brewery, and they do have a bit of a history which I'll talk about in just a minute when I talk about when they actually licensed it out to be brewed at another brewery. But before I do that, that's the bottle cap once more. It's a gold one, so if you see a gold one, you know you've got a Westvleteren 12. Pop that aside. I haven't got a chalice glass, but I've got a Spiegelau tulip glass, which will do perfectly well and is designed for Belgian strong ales. And I'll have to keep some of this for my wife, of course. So pours as you'd expect for a quad. It's quite dark brown, a little bit of reddish in there. My last memories of this beer are that it had quite sort of dark fruit characteristics, bit of raisin, Belgian yeast characteristics and some spice, and that the alcohol was very, very well hidden. I will say though, and some people will disagree with me, some people may agree with me, that on previous tastings, when I've done them side by side in terms of having a Westvleteren 8 and a Westvleteren 12, I've actually quite enjoyed the Westvleteren 8 a little bit more. So I'll leave it up to you guys if you ever drink them both at the same time or a couple of months apart or whatever it might be, you can decide which one you would prefer. But yeah, on the smell, very much like a Belgian quad or quadruple. And definitely quite a lot of characteristic coming out of that beer. And yeah, very, very interesting beer. And I can, yeah, it's taking me back to when I had it in Belgium. And when that, as I mentioned previously, I had it here at Christmas time and it probably wasn't drinking as well as I thought it should be. But yeah, it's a very good beer and I look forward to savouring that a little bit later on after this video. But I thought I'd give you a little bit of history with regards to Westvleteren, a bit more than what I've already given you. And, you know, $65 on the bottle or a trip to Belgium to try and pick some up at the cafe there or a trip to a local bottle shop that does have them there in Brussels or Bruges. It may not be everyone's cup of tea and I know that not everyone has kind of got that budget to be able to afford it. So there's a couple of other ways that you can get something very close to this and a chance to actually be able to taste this without it costing you a penny. So let's talk about that. In 1939, 1945 was World War II, and a lot of Belgium, as I mentioned last week, was destroyed during World War II by the Germans and the Allied combating over Belgian soil. A lot of that fighting kind of happened, well, there was a lot of fighting that happened up in that region of Ypres, Westvleteren, Popperinge, that I spoke about last week. And what happened is, while the brewery has been going since 1838, it had sustained so much damage that after the war they just couldn't really continue to brew. So they decided that they would actually license out the brewing to St. Bernardus. So St. Bernardus, you may have seen some of their beers. If you've come in store, if you've shopped online, you can get some of their beers. Very, very similar, Belgian style, and you know, Belgian strong darks and strong blondes and the like. So 1946, they decided to license out the production of the Westvleteren beers to St. Bernardus, which has got a bit of history with regards to some French monks that had kind of tried to get away from the warring that had been happening during World War II, had settled in a little farm area that was making cheese, and from that St. Bernardus kind of evolved. I'll put up a post to a very, very good blog that I always refer back to when I kind of want to remember a bit of the history of St. Bernardus and Westvleteren to understand exactly what it is. It's a guy that's visited the breweries many, many times. There's a couple of photos on there with regards to the inside of the breweries, and he also gives a bit of a potted history that I'm going to kind of share with you today. But I'll put that up so you can read that at your leisure. So 1946, they basically had to rebuild St. Sixtus Brewery, so they went to St. Bernardus, kind of like modern day contract brewing, I suppose, to a certain extent, where they've licensed it out to be brewed somewhere else. They created funds from that, which has allowed them to establish and rebuild the brewery and the monastery and so forth. Even the roads around the brewery had been kind of decimated by bombing and artillery fire and whatnot. And so over time they've rebuilt that. That went on for a little while with the licensed brewing being done out of St. Bernardus. And in 1962, the son of St. Bernardus, or the son that had taken over St. Bernardus Brewing, had decided to renegotiate or renew the terms of the licensing agreement for St. Bernardus, for Westvleteren, St. Sixtus. They renewed it 1962. He started discussions in about 1960. They allowed for 30 years more of licensed production. So up until 1992, the beer was being produced, I think, as well by St. Sixtus as well as St. Bernardus. In 1992, the monks of Westvleteren decided that they would not renew that and they would take all the production back in-house. So since 1992, all the production has been done in-house. St. Bernardus no longer brews the beer for Westvleteren, but these beers are very similar, and this is the reason why. So you can imagine the monks basically went to St. Bernardus to teach them how to actually brew their beers in 1946 when they started the licensing. So 1946 comes, they take over the recipes, the yeast, a monk, and some of the brewing equipment that I think they had remaining, and they teach them how to actually make it at St. Bernardus. So a lot of people do a side-by-side tasting of the Westvleteren 12 and the St. Bernardus ABT 12, because they're effectively, you could call them the same beer. And I say effectively you could call them the same beer because it's a little bit like Chinese whispers. Yes, back in 1946, they had the yeast, the recipe, and the know-how based off how they were being taught to actually make the beer, to then be able to create a beer that was exactly the same. A bit like Chinese whispers, it starts as one message and over time it kind of changes just that little bit. Same thing, I imagine that over time, while it's pretty much the same beer, I'm sure that it has to have some little differences to it. So that's one way that you can get, I guess, a slightly cheaper version of the Westvleteren 12. It's the St. Bernardus ABT 12, ABT standing for Abbot. Abbot is the name of the head monk father, or the head monk that looks after all the other monks in the abbey, but it's shortened to ABT instead of having to say St. Bernardus Abbot 12. But if you say Abbot 12, we'll know that it means ABT 12 for the St. Bernardus. About $10.50 a bottle, so about a sixth of the price. And I do know that some of our customers have done side-by-side tastings, and some of them have said that the St. Bernardus they feel is better than the Westvleteren 12. So there you go. It's kind of like one of those, you could buy an expensive bottle of red or a cheaper bottle of red, and the cheaper one may come out for your taste buds to be better than the more expensive one. Again, it's all subjective. What you like at home will be different to what I like. If you like the St. Bernardus ABT 12 more than the Westvleteren 12, so be it. If it's the other way around, so be it. So it's all good. So that's one way that you can taste a beer that is very similar to the Westvleteren 12. The other way is, I'll just take you back one thing. So I talked about the production. The one thing I don't think I mentioned is with regards to actually sourcing the Westvleteren beers. To actually be able to source them, you have to phone the brewery, make an appointment, and then once you've made that appointment, you have to give your registration number for your car, you've got to give your phone number, and you have to appear at the time that you were locked in to pick up the beers. When you show up, you can only pick up the beers they have available on the day, so if you wanted Westvleteren 12 and they've only got the 8, you get a case of the 8, and you cannot show up for another 2 months. So the same person, the same car and the same phone number cannot call up to make another appointment for another 2 months. So it's a bit of a way to kind of control and limit the access to the 63,000 cases of beer that are made each year. And knowing from experience, having tried to call the brewery to make an appointment and not being successful, I basically sat on the phone for a few hours during the day and it was just engaged the whole time. And if you want to try and change your appointment, it just doesn't happen. You will just have to go back to at the back of the line and try again on another day. So forgot to put that little bit of information in. But yeah, if you're ever there and you're wanting to do it, just make sure you've got A car, B, a phone number. From memory, you actually have to use a landline. They won't accept mobile phones, and expect to have a bit of patience and a bit of luck on your side to be able to lock in a time to make an appointment and go pick up some of the beers. So that's Westvleteren. That's a bit about the St. Bernardus brewery and the ABT 12, which is very, very similar as well. and the last way that you can taste this beer for free. You may have seen that I was doing a video on Tuesday just gone past with the launch of Sydney Craft Beer Week. So Sydney Craft Beer Week is in October. It runs from the 21st of October to the 30th of October. We've got an event on the 29th, which is the Saturday, so it's the second last day of Sydney Craft Beer Week. And our event is it's quite unique. We haven't seen it done before. I'm always liking to try and do something a little bit different, something that you guys at home will like to get involved with and participate in. And it's a bit of a lottery. So how it works is that we've got information about the tasting. It's $1,000 worth of craft beer to be tasted by 12 people at Flat Rock Brew Cafe, just in Narembeen, which is not far from our shop. So it is in Sydney. It is 100% free, but every person can enter. So you've just got to sign up to our email database or register via the Sydney Craft Beer website. So I'll put that link below as well once I'm finished this video. Once you're entered, that gives you one ticket into the entry. Obviously, you can get your wife to try and enter, you can get your friends and so forth, but everyone just gets the one entry. 12 people will then be selected just by chance. As I mentioned, it's a lottery, and those 12 people will be able to enjoy some beers, of which one of the beers will be the Westvleteren 12. So it's a 100% free way of getting a chance to actually taste the beer. So 29th of October, 6:30 or 6:30, I think it is, 6:39. Just 6:30, 9:30 p.m. Narembeen. You do have to register. To register, you do have to go to the Sydney Craft Beer Week page, go to our event page, and then you'll be able to register your email so we can get in contact with you, and that'll be your registration. Some of the other beers that we're looking to taste on the night is some Stone Enjoy After, which is a beer. Stone is known for beers which are enjoy by, or set within a certain time frame. Usually it used to be 60 days, but they've extended some of those time frames because of the Australian market and the fact that it takes approximately 30 to 40 days to land here anyway. So we're looking to have some of their Stone Enjoy After, the Westvleteren 12, Founders KBS, and a couple other sort of specialty beers that we'll be looking to source over the next couple of months. So that is pretty much it for me tonight. If you are after some of the Westvleteren beers, they are available online or in store. If you're after some of the St. Bernardus ABT 12, you can also get some of that. I know we got some fresh cases that arrived on either yesterday or the day before yesterday, so there is some stock. I highly recommend that beer if you have not tried it and you want to try some good Belgian beers. The St. Bernardus ABT 12 is very, very good value at about $10.50, and it is a exceptional beer and a bit of a cheats way of getting to taste what the Westvleteren 12 would taste like. So that's it from me. As always, thanks very much for tuning in. Don't forget you can hit the subscribe button so that anytime I do a live Facebook feed, you'll get notification. If there's specific topics you'd like me to cover or specific information, pop them in the comments box below, and I'd love to be creating content and information that you guys specifically would like me to cover. As always, I hope you guys are having a good night. I know I will with some Westvleteren 8 and some Westvleteren 12, and I look forward to catching up with you soon. Cheers.